On January 31, 1945, at Clark Air Base in the Philippines, Major Frank T. McCoy stood before a captured Mitsubishi G4M Betty bomber, tail number 763-12. As commander of the Technical Air Intelligence Unit, he had seen many wrecks, but this aircraft was pristine. When McCoy climbed inside the wings, he discovered a truth that redefined Allied understanding of Japanese aviation. The fuel tanks were completely unprotected. There was no self-sealing rubber, no armor, and no fire suppression. Only a 2-millimeter layer of aluminum separated thousands of liters of high-octane fuel from enemy fire. McCoy realized that Japanese engineers had traded the lives of their crews for sheer performance. This single discovery would dismantle every assumption American pilots held about their enemy, revealing a design philosophy that prioritized range over survival at a terrifying cost. The Betty's story began in 1937 with an impossible set of requirements. The Imperial Japanese Navy demanded a bomber with a top speed of 400 kilometers per hour and a range of nearly 5,000 kilometers. Kiro Honjo, lead designer at Mitsubishi, knew that current technology could not deliver such range alongside traditional safety features. Honjo's team calculated that armor and self-sealing tanks added over 500 kilograms, weight that would slash the aircraft's range. Under pressure to meet the Navy's outranging strategy, Honjo made a fateful decision. Protection would be sacrificed. Every saved kilogram was reinvested in fuel capacity. The resulting G4M was a masterwork of aerodynamics, but it was a flying tinderbox. Honjo delivered exactly what the Navy requested, a bomber that could strike targets further away than any other in the world, provided it never got hit. In the early days of the Pacific War, the Betty seemed invincible. On December 8, 1941, G4M formations struck Clark Field from bases 460 miles away, achieving total surprise and wiping out American air power in the Philippines. 2 days later, the Betty changed naval history forever. Joining older G3M Nell bombers, 26 Bettys attacked the British Force Z off the coast of Malaya. Using Type 91 aerial torpedoes with surgical precision, they sank the battleship HMS Prince of Wales and the battlecruiser HMS Repulse in just 90 minutes. For the first time, capital ships at sea had been destroyed solely by air power. The Betty became a symbol of Japanese reach, striking Darwin, Australia, and Port Moresby from distances that defied Allied logic. For 6 months, the Betty operated with impunity across the vast Pacific. The tide turned in mid-1942 during the Guadalcanal campaign. As American fighter strength grew, the Betty's fatal flaw became a gruesome liability. On August 8, 1942, 23 Bettys attacked American positions. 18 were shot down in minutes. American pilots discovered that a single burst of .50 caliber fire anywhere on the fuselage or wings caused the Betty to erupt in a catastrophic fireball. The aircraft earned grim nicknames: the Flying Cigar, the One-Shot Lighter, and the Flying Zippo. There was no middle ground in a Betty. You either returned untouched or you died in flames. The wet wing design meant that any puncture ignited fuel vapors that consumed the airframe instantly. By late 1942, the elite veteran crews who had sunk Force Z were being decimated. replaced by green pilots who had little hope of surviving their first encounter with a Corsair or Hellcat. The contrast between the Betty and the American B-17 Flying Fortress highlighted a fundamental difference in military philosophy. The B-17 was heavy, encased in steel armor, and equipped with self-sealing tanks that plugged holes mid-flight. American doctrine viewed trained crews as an irreplaceable asset, accepting a weight penalty of over 1,000 pounds to ensure their survival. Japanese doctrine reached the opposite conclusion. They assumed the war would be short and decided by offensive initiative. They gambled that their pilots' skill and the aircraft's range would keep them out of harm's way. But as the war became a prolonged struggle of industrial attrition, this philosophy backfired. While American factories replaced planes and saved crews, the Japanese lost their best aviators alongside their fragile bombers. The Betty was a weapon designed for a war that didn't exist, failing the moment it faced a sustained, well-equipped defense. On April 18, 1943, the Betty's vulnerability claimed Japan's greatest strategist, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto. American intelligence intercepted his flight plan, revealing he would be traveling in a G4M. Operation Vengeance saw 16 P-38 Lightnings fly a 400-mile low-level intercept to catch his flight over Bougainville. The mission was a test of extreme precision, but the kill itself was easy. When Lieutenant Rex Barber opened fire on Yamamoto's Betty, the unprotected wings ignited instantly. The bomber crumpled into the jungle, killing the admiral. The death of the man who planned Pearl Harbor was a crushing blow to Japanese morale. It was a stark reminder that even the most high-ranking officials were not safe in an aircraft that could be brought down by a single focused strafing run. The Betty's range had allowed Yamamoto to visit the front, but its fragility ensured he would never return. By 1945, the Betty was cast into a role that emphasized its desperation, a carrier for the MXY-7 Ohka suicide rocket. This 1,200-kilogram piloted bomb was slung beneath the Betty's belly, making the already vulnerable bomber slow and unmaneuverable. The plan required the Betty to fly within 20 kilometers of the American fleet before releasing the Ohka. On March 21, 1945, 18 Bettys carrying Ohkas were intercepted by Hellcats off Okinawa. The heavy bombers were helpless. Unable to evade or maneuver, they were picked off one by one long before they reached their release point. Every single Betty was destroyed, and 152 men were killed without a single weapon reaching its target. It was the ultimate failure of the G4M design, a plane built for range that could no longer survive the final miles of its journey. The Betty had become a victim of its own optimization. The Betty's final mission was one of peace. On August 19, 1945, two G4Ms, painted stark white with green crosses, departed Atsugi, carrying the Japanese surrender delegation. Using the call signs Baton 1 and Baton 2, they flew to meet Allied representatives. The aircraft that had opened the war by destroying American power in the Philippines now carried the architects of Japan's submission. Of the 2,400 Bettys produced, only a handful remained. Thousands of crews had perished in flying lighters because their government prioritized distance over life. The G4M was a brilliant engineering achievement that met every requirement its Navy asked for. Yet it remains a tragedy of design. It proved that in modern warfare, performance purchased at the cost of survivability is a losing bargain. The Betty began the war as a feared predator and ended it as a white-painted ghost, a testament to the high price of a flawed philosophy.